All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the fiscal year 2025 Michigan Department of Education Section 31A Annual Program and Fiscal Report webinar. This webinar will provide an overview of the Section 31A Annual Program and Fiscal Report that can be found in Nexus and that is due each year by July 15th. My name is Joan Cabrales, and I'm joined today by my colleagues on the Section 31A team, Dawn Carmody, Stephanie Holmes-Webster, and Suzanne Grambush. As we move through the presentation, please place any questions you may have in the chat, and our team will monitor those. Next slide. Let's take a look at the agenda and outcomes for this webinar. During this presentation, the Section 31A consultant team will provide a detailed walkthrough of the purpose of the Section 31A grant, the end of the year report, a short overview of the Nexus platform, and the step-by-step directions to successfully complete the Section 31A Annual Program and Fiscal Report, also known as the Section 31A APFR. Additionally, our team will share important contact information that you may use to reach out if you have additional questions. If you have specific questions relating to the current APFR or previous year's reports, you will contact Mrs. Judy Thielen, our OES Nexus analyst. In the Office of Educational Supports on our Special Populations Section 31A team, we have our Special Populations Unit Manager, Michelle Williams, and your designated single points of contact program consultants, which include Dawn Carmody, Stephanie Holmes-Webster, Suzanne Grambush, and me, Joan Cabrales. We are all happy to assist you regarding your Section 31A technical assistance needs. As we begin our presentation today, it's important to remember that the Section 31A at-risk grant is a categorical grant. This means that it provides additional supplemental funds for targeted support to at-risk eligible students to achieve proficiency in English language arts by 3rd grade, proficiency in math by 8th grade, and career and college readiness by the end of high school. Career and college readiness proficiency is measured in 11th grade with the SAT assessment to ensure that students have the necessary skills for continuing with their education or joining the workforce. In addition to academic achievement outcomes, the intent and purpose of Section 31A also focuses on students attending school regularly to ensure they engage in educational opportunities. Much of the APFR has not changed from last year, but we would like to provide a couple of important reminders when using Nexus. All Nexus users must have a Michigan login account or a My Login account. On this slide, you will see a link for a resource that may help your team create My Login accounts if you need to. An important consideration is that Level 4 users must be assigned to the Section 31A report by a Level 5 authorized official. The second link on this slide is an easy checklist of how your Level 5 authorized official can assign applications or reports to Level 4 authorized users. If this is your first time using Nexus, there's new terminology used in comparison to MEGS Plus in previous years. This new vocabulary aligns to other state systems such as the Education Entity Master or the EEM and Sigma. As an example, in MEGS Plus, the term agency refers to districts, while in the Nexus system, you'll see the terms organization and entity. Another example is that instead of the word grant, you will see the term program used like program name or program number. Next slide. Oh, no, next slide. When you log into your My Login screen, after you have acknowledged the pop-ups, the first screen you'll see is your dashboard. On the dashboard, you will see 3 widgets or panes, including My Tasks, My Opportunities, and Announcements. My tasks is your to-do list. These are the applications or reports that have been initiated or assigned. My opportunities are the programs, formerly called grants, that are available for your district or organization. This is the list of application reports available. Some are required while others may be competitive or optional for your district. Announcements is the panel where MDE and the Nexus platform can provide a variety of updates or announcements. This feature in Nexus was not available in MEGS Plus. When you choose the Section 31A APFR from your My Task panel on your dashboard, your second screen will be the report as seen in the screenshot shown here. Let's do a quick overview of some of the features of this report. First, there's the tabs bar. This is the blue bar across the top of the report. It will be accessible from anywhere in the Nexus platform. On the far left, you'll see the home button, which takes you back to the Nexus dashboard. To the right of the home button is administration, which will allow users administrative functions for their district, and searches, which allows overall function within Nexus, especially to search different applications and reports. On the far right of the blue tabs bar, you will see some icons. This includes the half circle, which allows you to change the theme setting of the application. This button switches the visible settings from black to white. There is also a book icon where you can access the Nexus platform manual. Located on the tabs bar to the far right will be the user's name. This allows you to access the user profile, messages, edit the dashboard, and access a logout link. Next, let's look at the report number. The report or application number will share some important information regarding the task that you're in. The first part of the code describes the application or report. So in this case, you'll see the number 31A is identified since this is the Section 31A APFR. Then it shows the fiscal year followed by the district code. When hovering over this ID, you will see the application or report name, the current status of this task, your role in the district, and the due date. If you click on the report number, you'll be taken back to the landing page or document overview from anywhere in this report. Next, let's look at the navigation form slide menu. When you expand the navigation slide menu, there's a long list of forms or screens that will be displayed. These screens are broken up into sections. Let's look at the first three sections on the left side of this slide. The first section in the Section 31A APFR is called Forms. There are 4 forms or screens under the Forms section of the report. The first 3 screens or forms are required by all districts. They include the cover page, important information, and assurances and certifications. The last link in the Forms section is the Help Guide. All districts are recommended to download this guide to help ensure that you're completing the report in a timely and accurate manner. The second subsection is called Program Information. These are the forms for the Section 31A Annual Program and Fiscal Report that will describe how the district spent these grant funds during the grant cycle, including the school year and this summer's programming. We'll look at these forms in detail in the step-by-step component of this webinar. The third subsection of the navigation slide menu is called Attachments. There's one form in the subsection called Miscellaneous Attachments. This is an optional selection and is provided for cases in which the district may need to upload any supporting documentation requested by a consultant in the Section 31A APFR. Next, let's look at the middle screenshot in this slide. The next section of the navigation slide menu is the tools. This section has a variety of tools that are available in the report. The first tool is called Document Framework. The document framework is like a landing page. This will take you to the report status timeline and the original screen you saw when you first entered the report. The second tool in this Nexus section is called the Add Edit People tool. This is the tool to use to assign the report to other users in the district or organization. This tool will be necessary for authorized officials level 5 to assign the section 31A APFR to authorized users level 4. Until an authorized official assigns the authorized user the task, the user will not have access to the Save button or be able to save the entered data in the fiscal year 25 section 31A annual program and fiscal report. The next three tools include the document status history, the document attachment repository, and the document modification summary. These tools will not be used frequently while completing the section 31A APFR due to this being an end of the year report and not an application that requires multiple modifications. These are general Nexus tools, which is why they are a part of the navigation slide menu in the section 31A APFR. These may be useful tools if the district requests to amend their report for accurateness in September after final summer expenditures have been determined, or if a modification is requested by a section 31A consultant due to a monitoring or audit finding. Next in the tools section is the document validation link. This could be used before you hit submit on your application or your report to determine if there are any global errors that need to be fixed before you can submit. And then the last three tools are the notes form, the print document, and document messages. The notes tool is a summary of all of the notes that have been written in the report on any screen or form. The notes are like the former review comments in Megs Plus. The print document tool is available to print the entire report from one screen. A tip or trick to remember is to only print one form or screen, or maybe two at a time. It's not recommended to click all of the radio buttons and hit print, as this will take many minutes to download into a PDF. The last tool there is document messages, and this would be any messages that are sent through the Nexus system. When we look to the far right of this slide, we see the last two sections of the navigation slide menu, status options and related documents. First, the status options. In this section of the slide menu, the user completing the report will see all of the available options to change the status of the report. Some status change options may include submit, cancel, or modify. So in this screen, you will see the options that are available is submitting the report to MDE or canceling the report, which will delete it out of the Nexus system. The reason that these two options are available is due to the current status of the report as being application in process. The last section of the form slide menu is related documents. For the section 31A APFR, this section has no action required and is not used in this end of the year report. Related documents is a general Nexus heading, and in other OES applications, such as the consolidated application or section 41A application, this function may be utilized. So let's think of some key reminders to keep in mind as you work in Nexus on the section 31A APFR. First, there are different user levels. For each district, authorized officials level 5 and authorized users level 4. Authorized officials need to initiate the report, and if they would like an authorized user level 4 to help finish the report, they need to assign it using that Add Edit button. Hovering over the report's ID will let you see the current status of your report and your role in the district. And remember to hit save each time you finish a screen before progressing to the next page. To support an accurate and timely completion of the Section 31A APFR, ensure you provide comprehensive data that accurately reflects your planning, programming, and use of funding. Districts will want to consider bringing together a team, including representatives from your program office, business office, and nutrition services office. Important documents to reference include your continuous improvement plans, end of the year Section 31A expenditure reports, program planning, including information including program costs, estimated summer program costs, grade levels served, and student count served. When reporting the number of students who were served and who benefited from the Section 31A at-risk programming utilizing these funds, you will report the total student count served, as well as the number of students within that count who were eligible for free and reduced price meals. In most cases, these numbers will not be the same, as there will be at-risk eligible students served or impacted who qualify in other areas other than the eligibility for free and reduced price meals. As mentioned earlier, under the Forms section of the navigation slide menu is the district's cover page. The cover page populates with information from the Education Entity Master, or EEM, and lists your district's name and address. There are fields for you to select the main contact representative as well as the secondary contact person from your district. You select these names from a drop-down list populated from users you have added in Nexus. Once you have ensured this information is accurate, you can click Save in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. When you select your contacts, if their contact information is not accurate in the cover page, they should update their My Login profile. The next three forms or screens are Important Information, Assurances and Certifications, and the Help Guide PDF. Here you will find information about the use of this report, the section-by-section breakdown, submission requirements, the MDE contact information, and general grant information. Districts are required to review this information prior to submission. The help guide is highly recommended to be printed out prior to filling out the report so you can refer to it while completing the different screens. After reading each screen, you'll see a check will be added to the square next to the form name. This will indicate that the form is completed and has no errors. If you see an exclamation point in that box, this means that there is an error on that form that needs to be fixed before the report can be submitted. Here's what the help guide looks like. It provides step-by-step directions on how to complete all 4 sections of the Section 31 APFR. It's a PDF document that can be easily downloaded and printed. When you click on the form button, it will download into your web browser's download file. Let's dive into what each section is about in the APFR and the help guide. Section 1 is the district compiled report. Section 2 are instructional supports. Section 3, direct non-instructional supports and professional learning. Section 4, school breakfast programs. And Section 5 is new, expanded use of funds, which is optional for eligible districts. The APFR and help guide are arranged into 4 sections to reflect the divisions of the report. As I mentioned, Section 1, LEA compiled report. There is Part A, includes Section 31A carryover and current year expenditures at a glance. Part B, populated calculations, and Part C is where LEAs indicate if they have utilized school-wide reform. Section 2 is where districts list direct instructional supports, secondary program expenditures, direct instructional supports provided during the day, after school, and extended school year opportunities. This is also where districts will answer 2 questions regarding their implementation of MTSS, a multi-tiered system of supports. Section 3 is for direct non-instructional supports, including social, emotional, and health-related supports, as well as funding to support professional learning and parent-family community engagement. Section 4 is for reflecting expenditures related to school breakfast programs. And new this year is Section 5, which is optional for those districts that were eligible and used this provision of the law this school year. Before we begin directions for completion, keep in mind that the APFR Help Guide will assist you along the way. As a reminder, Section 31A is a state aid grant designated for the current state fiscal year. The State School Aid Act allocates these funds to be spent during the current allocation year. Funds not spent during the allocation year may be carried over and would be available to be spent during the following year. Any funds not spent in the immediately following year would then be forfeited. Similar to federal funding, the state funding follows the first in, first out rule. To illustrate, if during the 22-23 school year an LEA had 2021-2022 Section 31A carryover, these funds would be expended first before the new allocation would be spent. It's important that business offices and program offices have written procedures that align to various accounting and programming requirements for accurate accounting and program planning. For the purpose of end-of-year reporting on the APFR, districts should report Section 31A expenditures for the current school year and any funds to be expended for at-risk summer programming that the current year's grant will fund. Because the APFR is due on July 15th, as required by state legislation, and summer programming will likely extend beyond this due date, it's important to estimate and report any anticipated costs. Again, any Section 31A funds not expended by the end of the district summer programming, which is generally August 31st or whenever the next school year starts, those will become carryover for next year. Since Section 31A expenditures are reported after planning and not submitted as an application, there is no formal amendment period for the Section 31A APFR. Since summer expenditures are estimates, LEAs are encouraged to reach out to your Section 31A single point of contact consultant or the general Section 31A mailbox if modifications are needed due to changes in the summer programming estimates versus what the actual expenditures were. Often districts will reach out to our consultant team in September to modify their current report, which will help to ensure that the next reporting cycle is accurate.
Good morning, everyone. This is Stephanie Holmes-Webster going to pick up here. So let's jump into the specific Section 31A APFR report sections. On the far left side of the Nexus screen, you will find the slide menu. The first form in this section is Section 1, District Compiled Report. Section 1 includes 3 parts, A, B, and C. We will take a look at each part. When clicking on the Section 1 District Compiled Report form on the navigation slide menu, your main screen will look like the screenshot on this slide. Let's take a look at Section 1, Part A. Part A contains 2 years of at-a-glance fiscal information at the district level. This section includes the prior Section 31A grant information, which focuses on the current grant cycle's carryover, the current year allocation, and the total amount spent by the district during the grant cycle. In Table 1, the fields are populated to display the previous year's final allocation, the allocation amount previously spent as reported on last year's report, and the calculated carryover amount. Most amounts are populated and transferred from the previous year's report. If the district needs to make adjustments or corrections to the prior year report, please contact your specific point of contact or your SPOC and our financial unit analyst, Mrs. Judy Thalen. She will have to make adjustments once your report is reopened to ensure accuracy for reporting for this year. Once she makes the changes, you can proceed with this year's reporting. In Table 1, The only reporting that a district needs to complete is row 4, the carryover spent during the current grant cycle. As explained earlier, the State Aid Act states in Section 18A that all funds appropriated under this law need to be spent within 1 year of receiving the grant, unless otherwise specified. This 1 year of carryover section of the law applies to Section 31A at-risk grant. This grant is allocated by the Michigan legislature to implement programming that supports students during the intended grant cycle or school year. Therefore, Table 1, Row 4, enter text box should equal Table 1, Row 3, total carryover available. If a district did not meet the first in, first out rule and tries to enter a low amount in Row 4, an error message will appear on your screen. If your district finds that this is the case for your district, you'll have to contact your specific point of contact to determine how we can remedy the issue and submit your report. If 100% of your carryover funds are not going to be spent in the allowable amount of time, then returning the funds will have to occur through a prior year adjustment. In Table 2, the fiscal information reported is related to the current grant amount spent. In this table, the estimated Section 31A allocation from April is displayed in row 1. Remember, your Section 31A grant is an estimate until you receive your last payment in August due to the proration clause written in the law. In rare occasions, the final grant may be larger than listed on your report. Changes to your grant after March are rare, but we wanted to make sure we call attention to this so you won't be surprised. In Table 2, the district will complete Table 2, Row 2, to report how much of the grant was and will be spent during the grant performance period of this school year and summer programming. This reported amount may be an estimated amount due to any Section 31A funded summer programming and supports still in progress while you're completing the report, which is due on July 15th. In Table 3, the amount of Section 31A grant funds spent by the district during the current grant cycle will be calculated by adding the two text box totals. This includes carryover plus your current allocation amount spent that were entered in Table 1 and Table 2. Lastly, in Part A, you will enter the number of schools in your district that utilize Section 31A funding during this year's grant cycle. As a final reminder for Part A, districts should make sure the information reported is accurate due to the fiscal amounts being used for future reports. Due to this being an end-of-year report and not an application, there's no formal amendment window. We do realize districts may have reporting after the July 15th due date, so please contact your SPOC after August 31st to make any necessary changes for spending in your same fiscal year up until September 15th. After September 15th, you'll have to wait until the next April in order to make those adjustments. In Section 1 District Compile Report, we're moving on to Part B. In your help guide, you will be on page 2, Section 1, Part B. So in this part of your form, lines 1 through 8 will initially be 0. As you populate your report in Section 2, Instructional Supports, and Section 3, Direct Non-Instructional Supports, and Section 4, School Breakfast Program, these forms will begin to complete this section. The lines on Section 1 through 8 in District Compile Report will begin to populate. The reporter will need to complete line 10 by entering the total number of unduplicated at-risk pupils served. What unduplicated headcount means is that each student served benefited from Section 31A funded supported services in the district during the grant performance period is only counted one time during the fiscal year. We do realize that students may receive multiple services from Section 31A, but here you are only doing unduplicated headcount. So just to give an example, let's say you have a building that funds during the day reading intervention, teacher who has a caseload of students, a summer school program, and a social worker with the Section 31A grant. Student A participates in all of those services. On this first section, the student A would only be counted once because we're doing unduplicated headcount. As an important note to know about Section 1, Part B and Section 1, Part A is that line in Part B should be equal to Table 3 in Section 1, Part A. Due to lines number 1 through 8 not populated until the whole report is complete and each form is saved, you're going to continue to see an error message until you navigate back to Section 1 after you finish 4 or 5, and then that message will clear once you get ready to submit if everything is equal. So it will continue to say that both parts A and B do not match, and they will not until you finish. Don't worry, you want to complete the rest of the form and then get ready to submit, but you must complete line 10. In Section C of your report, which is school-wide reform, if the LEA qualified for and used funding in this manner, the district must complete this section of the report. You will check yes and continue to complete the rest of this section. Amount spent does not have to equal the total amount spent on Section 1 of the compiled report. Districts that have used school-wide reform must indicate at least one strategy used with school-wide reform in order to move forward and not receive an error message in the report. If the district checks other, you must explain what the strategy utilized was in the text box provided. And now we will move on to Section 2, which is direct instructional supports, pre-kindergarten, and you are completing the My MTSS narrative response questions. In Section 2, Part A, this is where the district will report the instructional supports that were provided to our at-risk eligible students. This includes supports provided for secondary program planning, instructional supports, or MTSS K-12, and intervention supports during the day, after school, and during extended school year programming, which could also refer to intersession and also summer school planning. Section 2, Part B, is where districts will report pre-kindergarten, supplemental supports for added needs. In Section 2, Part C is where districts will respond to questions about their multi-tiered systems of support. Note that this year, we have added a question about EWIMs or early warning interventions and monitoring systems and acted as MTSS as secondary, and that was added last year. In Section 2, Part A of the report, Instructional Supports Table, the first table in Section 2, Part A, includes categories related to programming for at-risk eligible students in grades 9 through 12 or secondary programming planning. In your help guide, you are on pages 2 and 3, and in your APFR, you are looking at Section 2, Part A. The district will report direct instructional supports for secondary program planning here first. The program categories have not changed from previous years and reflect allowances for supplemental secondary expenditures for Section 31A funding. In columns A through C, report the actual grade levels served, the total numbers of at-risk pupils served, and the number of students from the total served who were eligible for free or reduced price meals. In column D, report the amount of Section 31A funding that was spent in each of these designations. If your district did not use Section 31A funding for these categories, you would leave those columns blank. So here is something that is new this year in our section, Intervention Supports During the Day. For those students that do qualify under McKinney-Vento Services and Supports, there is available funding to support the student remaining in their home school or school of origin. Any funding spent to support those students will be placed here now under intervention supports during the day, students experiencing homelessness, transportation to school of origin. So we can glance now at some helpful hints for reporting in the secondary program planning section. This information is also located in your help guide document for your reference. The help guide includes information that we are sharing today, as well as more detailed information to help answer any questions you may have as you complete the report. On pages 2 through 4 of the help guide, it will include more specific information about completing section 2 if you have questions, and we also provide examples. In section 2, districts will report all supplemental allowable costs related to specific secondary programming, such as staffing, materials, transportation, and allowable tuition costs and fees. There are 9 APFR secondary program areas listed in the table on the far right. On your slide, you'll see International Baccalaureate, Advanced Placement Coursework, English Learner Service Programs, Credit Recovery, Career and Technical Coursework Supports, Dual Enrollment Programming, Alternative Ed Supplemental Supports, SAT Prep Coursework, and GED Coursework. Any cost related to programming provided to grades 9 through 12 that has been reported in this part of the APFR table should not be included in any other section of the APFR, as no expenditures here should be duplicated. If you or your district team has secondary program planning context-specific questions, please feel free to contact your SPOC. So now we're still on Help Guide page 3. We're on step 2. We're still looking at instructional supports, but we're going to take a look at a different section of your instructional supports, or MTSS K-12. This is the area to report expenditures for instructional behavior coaches, MTSS coaches or coordinators, any supplemental K-12 core content area teacher, instructional materials purchased with Section 31A funds, excluding any that you've already reported for secondary 9 through 12, academic paraprofessionals, behavior paraprofessionals, and any behavioral interventionists, whether they are certified or licensed or not. As before, columns A through C, you will report the actual grade level served, the total number of at-risk eligible pupils served, and the number of students who were eligible for free or reduced price meals. In column D, report only the amount of Section 31A funds that were spent on these services. If funding was not used to support these, then you will leave those rows blank. The next slide will provide some helpful hints on completing this section of the report. So we are on section 2, table 1, intervention supports during the day after school, extended reports. And in these parts of the table, you will report any certified teachers that provided intervention or tutoring in the areas of reading, writing, math, social studies, and science that are funded with Section 31A funds. Additionally, paraprofessionals and interventionists providing supplemental English learner program services to English learner students in grades K through 8 will also be reported here. And as before, you will fill out your columns A through C and D, only reporting funds that were spent with Section 31A. Remember to avoid duplication for any services and supports that were already reported earlier in this section of the table. And one more reminder for Section 2, extended supports, before we go to another helpful hints. This was new last year, but we'd like to call attention to it again in the 2025 Annual Program and Fiscal Report. We added a category last year for reporting allowable supplemental transportation expenses for after school. So this one is applicable to extended supports and services for our students who qualify. This would include any transportation costs funded with our grant to support the implementation of for before, after school, or summer programming for our students. So now I'm going to hand it over. Oh, one more slide, I'm sorry. So for our intervention supports during the day, here is our helpful hints section. So you'll want to review the slide for some helpful reminders from section 2, table 1, parts 3 and 4. Your left column of your first table reiterates what we discussed on the previous slide as to what will be reported under these intervention supports, including academic interventionists, our K through 8 English learner staff, including interventionists and paraprofessionals, and transportation costs for extended day and school year programming. The center column indicates what will not be reported in this section on the previously reported instructional reports. The table on the far right also lists allowable support categories for part 3 and 4.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. I'm Suzanne Grambush. I'm a colleague of Joan and Stephanie in the Office of Educational Supports. We'll move on to section 2, part B, This is where districts report the use of Section 31A funding to provide supplemental support in their pre-kindergarten programs. So districts may use up to 10% of their grant to provide supplemental instruction and or direct services for at-risk eligible pre-kindergarten students in programs that meet the requirements of the Great Start Readiness Program. Districts that did not provide supplemental services and supports for pre-kindergarten during the 24-25 school year may skip this page. Districts that did use 31A to support pre-kindergarten students, check yes, the LEA utilized funding for pre-kindergarten, and complete the table for all related expenditures. For districts who mark yes, at least one row or category must be completed, including all columns A through C. The total number of at-risk pupils served, the number of students served who were eligible for free and reduced priced meals, and the amount of Section 31A funding spent for each identified category. Let's look at the next slide for more on allowable uses for pre-kindergarten. So allowable expenditures include funding additional seats, transportation costs for eligible students, professional learning for staff, MTSS coaches or PBIS program coaches, supplemental English learner program services and materials, social emotional learning supplemental supports, and supplemental materials. Allowable expenditures for professional learning are limited to the topics of implementing a coaching model, implementing MTSS with fidelity, and professional learning related to literacy legislation. Districts are welcome to reach out to their Section 31A single point of contact consultant with questions or to be a thought partner. All supplemental pre-kindergarten supports funded with Section 31A must be to provide evidence-based instruction and direct services to at-risk eligible pre-kindergarten students as defined in the law. Again, if you have specific questions, reach out to your single point of contact. If you have questions about Michigan's Great Start Readiness Program, we encourage you to reach out to Michelle McManus at MyLeap. She's in the Office of Early Education. And so now we'll move on to the final part of Section 2. And this section includes 5 questions regarding the LEA's implementation of a multi-tiered system of support. The questions are designed to collect information about the district's implementation of MTSS, how they're measuring the framework's effectiveness at the building level, and how they're providing ongoing professional learning to continually refine their tiered supports. In the first question, districts are asked to provide specific information regarding who provides the district with professional learning or technical assistance related to MTSS. And question 2 asks, what is the specific fidelity measure or tool used within schools to measure the fidelity of MTSS implementation? There are also 2 questions that ask districts to share which components of MTSS they might be interested in receiving additional professional learning. And finally, a question about implementation of the Early Warning Intervention and Monitoring System, or EWIMS, which is a tiered delivery of services that supports secondary students. And we'll talk a little more about each of these questions. So the first MTSS question asks, during the 24-25 school year, list who provided the LEA with professional learning and or technical assistance to support pre-K-12 MTSS implementation. For example, the My MTSS TA Center, an ISD, or a vendor. So question 1 is asking for specific information about who is providing the professional learning and the technical assistance that's directly related to continuous improvement and the multi-tiered system of support. So who is providing expertise and working toward full implementation of all of the components of MTSS? Who's supporting staff in their understanding and application of strategies to implement a tiered framework with fidelity? what new learning is taking place for ongoing improvement. Sources of support may include the ISD or RESA, the MyMTSS TA Center, or a private vendor, and those are just a few examples. If you respond with the name of an ISD or an individual, we ask that you include the role of the individual and the type and topic of training. It's important to note that answers like not applicable are red flags, since the implementation of MTSS is legislatively required for all districts who receive Section 31A funding. And we understand that all LEAs are on their own path toward full implementation, but answers such as not applicable could be interpreted as an LEA not meeting the assurances required for Section 31A. So again, this question requires a response. It can't be left blank. And if assistance or clarification is needed, please reach out to your point of contact. So next, we're going to just give you some examples of what would represent appropriate responses for question 1. The first example shows a list of personnel who provided the professional learning, followed by a list of topics covered. We ask that you keep the response simple by providing a list. Similarly, the next example indicates the name of the ISD and the professional learning provided, aligned with the needs and implementation of tiered support. And the final example demonstrates how a district might respond to indicate their plan moving forward if their district was not involved in professional learning or technical assistance related to MTSS in the current year. So the next slide shows some non-examples of responses to question 1. So these responses would not be appropriate, not at this time, or not applicable, would not be acceptable. Generic descriptions that don't provide specific information about the source of professional learning and the subject that is aligned to your improvements would also not be appropriate. So question 2 asks LEAs to list the fidelity tool or tools the district is using to measure the implementation of MTSS as intended. So the question is asking for specific information regarding the fidelity measures being used within schools to measure the effectiveness of the implementation of the key components of MTSS. It asks what tool the district is using to examine and reflect on how successfully they're meeting the requirements of those key components. A fidelity measure will show where the LEA is in the continuum of full implementation. Fidelity tools are used to keep track of which features are in place and to what extent. These may include a tiered fidelity inventory, a district-generated classroom-level rubric, a detailed strategy implementation guide, or an MTSS self-reflection tool. And that's just to name a few. So examples of what would represent appropriate responses for question 2. The first example is a list of fidelity measures that a district may be using. Again, please keep it simple by providing a list. The second example demonstrates how a district might respond to indicate their plan moving forward if they aren't currently using an appropriate fidelity tool. So next, some examples, some non-examples for fidelity tools. So as we mentioned, not at this time is not an appropriate response. Additionally, stating that Section 31A funds are not being used to implement MTSS is not an appropriate response. Or stating a needs assessment and district planning is in place is generic and doesn't provide information related to a fidelity tool. And then student progress monitoring tools, for example, universal screeners, are not measures of fidelity. And so they're not appropriate responses to this question. The Section 31A website includes a webinar that has more detailed information about fidelity tools. And as always, you can reach out to your point of contact or visit the MyMTS TA Center for more information and resources on appropriate fidelity tools. So the next question asks districts if they're currently implementing the Early Warning Intervention and Monitoring System, or EWIMS, to enact MTSS for secondary students. And these responses help us drive upcoming professional learning and collaboration. And again, a response is required to move on to the next section of the report. And the final two questions relate to MTSS and ask districts to share areas they would like further guidance and resources. The first question asks, of the 5 components of MTSS, in what areas would the district benefit from further guidance and resources? And districts are invited to check all that apply. The second question asks, at which levels additional guidance and resources might be helpful, elementary, middle, or high school? And again, districts may choose all that apply. And our team will use this information to plan upcoming technical assistance and professional learning. So next is section 3, direct supports, and I will pass it to Dawn.
All right, thank you so much, Suzanne. So we are going to go ahead and keep on marching through the Section 31A APFR, thinking about the next form called Section 3, direct non-instructional supports and professional learning. So again, this is going to be on your help guide page 4, and we're going to start by looking at the top and Part A. So there is 3 sections, Part A, B, and C, on the Section 3 form. So Part A is your direct non-instructional supports. And here again is going to be a range of non-instructional supports that are directly being provided to students. So some of the things you'll see in this section, some of the categories include school health clinics, which is really your school nurse, thinking about medical, thinking about mental health contracts or medical contracts, thinking about counseling services, social work. And then you'll also see a category at the bottom of this first table called activities to support chronic absenteeism. So again, just like in the earlier section in section 2, if your school funds any of those categories with the Section 31A grant, you would fill out the entire row. So if you had counseling services, the allowable part of counseling services that are supplemental and providing tier 2 and tier 3 to at-risk eligible students, you would make sure you reported the actual grades being served, the total number of at-risk pupils being served. Out of the total at-risk pupils being served, how many of those students qualify for economically disadvantaged? And then finally, in the last column, what amount of the Section 31A grant supports that category? Again, remember that last column, column D, is only reporting Section 31A funds. Often some of these non-instructional supports are going to be split funded with other grant sources, general fund, Title I, some of your other 31s, 31AA or O or N. So remember, on this report, we're only focusing on the portion that is 31A funded. Part B is other supports that are allowable with Section 31A. All districts have to answer in Part B the first radio button question. The radio button question asks, does the district have 50% or more students eligible for free and reduced price meals? Please make sure that everyone fills out either the yes or no. If you leave that radio button blank, it will give you an error, even if you are not reporting any other services in this table in Part B. So you have to fill out the radio button. The first 2 rows in the Part B table, school parent liaisons and school security personnel, has a little note with those categories. The note says you have to answer yes to the above question in order to be able to use the funding in this manner. So again, you'll see, and if you weren't eligible with 50% or more economically disadvantaged students in Michigan for this previous school year, then you will get a warning about those too. Other supports also include anti-bullying, crisis intervention, parent, family, and community engagement. And now we have a new category, the homeless liaison, education liaison, in case you do split fund that role as well. Any roles that you split fund with 31A, again, you will fill out all 4 columns under this other supports table. And again, you're still on page 4 of your help guide. Part C of section 3 is professional learning. Remember, section 31A is allowed by law to use some of the funds, no cap anymore. The cap came off about 3 or 4 years ago. So professional learning is an allowable use of the section 31A grant as long as the professional learning that is provided with section 31A is related to 3 topics. It's related to implementing MTSS K-12 with fidelity and using the data from the MTSS system, your multi-tiered system of supports, implementing a coaching model, and complying with the Read by Grade 3 law, which is now called K-12 Literacy and Dyslexia Law. Right now, you still see this category is regarding complying with Read by Grade 3 law, professional learning related to that. In the future, you will see a name change here as the section 1280F has now been rebranded this year with the new passing and updates of the law. Again, if your district uses funds in any of those manners, here you have to fill out the row with just 2 columns. The grades served, so what staff, what grade levels were impacted? Is it K-3? Is it a 6 through 12? And then the amount of funds spent from the section 31A grant. If you have any questions regarding part A, B, or C of your section 3, please reach out to your section 31A consultant. Let's go to the next form. Again, this is another familiar form. Section 4 is your school breakfast program. As you may be aware, the section 31A law requires that all districts that serve a school breakfast program supplements their breakfast program with a portion of their district section 31A at-risk grant. This form is where the districts will be reporting the amount of funds that they supplement the school breakfast program with. Remember to hit save when you first enter this page to populate what your free and reduced priced meals count was that was used for the current year allocation. We have shared over the last few years, and if you're new, you might want to make sure you review our Office of Educational Supports Program Allocations website. On that website, you probably already are familiar with it because that's where you would find your federal grants for the consolidated app, estimates, and final allocations. But on that website, we also have our Section 31A allocations. And if you click on that estimated Section 31A allocations spreadsheet, you will see column D shows you what number you're economically disadvantaged that will populate in this page and that your current year allocation is based on, following the rules of the law. So again, working with your nutrition's office, you have to have some collaboration with your nutrition office about what are the needs for the school breakfast program to help either make a healthier breakfast, more local fruit and vegetable choices, or maybe they need a warming cart or other things. Our Office of Nutritional Supports has come out with a great guidance document about how the Section 31A supplemental funds can be used. So you would just fill in per student anywhere from a penny to $10 that will be then calculated. And that's in that 3rd column to show what you supplemented your breakfast program with. Even if your nutrition program is ran by another district, if you have an alternate agreement for your nutrition grants with another district, you need to consult with that district about how a portion of the funds will be used and what's the needs of the program. That planning is actually already in the alternative agreement application for your nutrition grants. There should be a question in that alternative agreement that you're completing as part of that coordination. Lastly, there is just a handful, about maybe 5% of our districts or less in the state that does not currently serve a school breakfast program. In order to not serve a school breakfast program, you have to meet certain criteria in the law, which is be less than 20% economically disadvantaged. You also have had to go through a board approval process to declare that you will not be serving a school breakfast program. If both of those are true conditions, then there is a checkbox that says our district is exempt and does not provide school breakfast. If you are one of those districts, you would check that box and then leave the rest of the page blank and just hit save to complete this page and have no errors. On to our new section, Section 5, the expanded use of funds. You will see that there's 3 parts on this page, Part A, Part B, and Part C. So just to give our webinar participants a little bit of background today about this new section. So you may have known, or you may not have, it might be new information to you, that when the School State Aid Act was signed the last week of July in 2024, there was new law, there's new language added, 4 new paragraphs added to our Section 31A law that is being called this year the expanded use of Section 31A. And what these new Section 14, A and B, did was it allowed eligible districts that were in bands 5 and 6 to use their current Section 31A grant in more flexible ways. They could use up to a 30% for Section 31A 14A and Section 31A 14B if they met all the requirements and completed the fall November 1 report that was in Nexus, the Section 31A 14 intent to use report. So again, if the districts were eligible and they made sure that they met the assurances of these new flexible use, expanded use of funds, then they were able to use the funds in this new way. For reporting in the Section 31A annual program and fiscal report, end of the year report this year, everyone has to do this page. If you were not an eligible district and you did not complete the November 1 report, your job's pretty simple. You're just going to answer 2 short radio button questions at the top of this page that you can see on this slide that asks, was your district eligible for this flexibility or the new Section 31A expanded use of funds? If you were not, which only about 150 districts were, you would just answer no and indicate no with the radio button. If you were, you would answer yes, if you were in the band 5 and 6. The second radio button question asks, did you use the flexibility? Did you submit this Section 31A 14 intent to use form? And I do see there's a typo in our slide. I'll fix that before we send the slide deck out. The second question that you need to select yes or no for says, indicate if the district submitted the November 1 Section 31A 14 intent to use form. So again, you can see that right on the image, and we'll get that updated in the words as well. So again, you're going to answer yes or no based on that question. If both questions are no, you are done with this page. You are going to save this page. You're going to go back to Section 1, resave that page so all your populated information in Part B comes into play and you're ready to submit. If you were one of our about 75 districts that did use these new expanded use of funds, about 5% of districts did, or 10% of districts did, then you have to complete the rest of this page. One thing to note is at the top of the page, there is some data being pulled in for all districts, whether you were an eligible district or not. Please disregard that if you were not an eligible district this year. So if you are one of our 75 districts that were eligible for the opportunity this year and did use the funds in these new expanded use of funds ways, these new flexibilities, you're going to complete the rest of this page. And that's what we're going to go over next. So Part B is about the section 14A, about the reduction of teacher to student ratio. So again, this is for K3 schools only, for K3 classrooms only. And if your district filled out the November 1, section 41A or 31A 14 intent to use report, and you said you wanted to use it in your K3 classrooms to reduce the teacher to student ratio, you're going to check the box at the top of Part B that says, yes, we did use funds in this manner for section 14A. And then you're going to fill out the rest of the table. So you're going to complete the table and you're going to notice some columns have the pre-populated data that you put in to your November 1 report is going to pull forward. Other columns are going to have text boxes for you to answer what was the final data that happened when you did some new hiring this year. So you're going to complete one row for each school. And in that one row for each school, you're going to see that the school name, the school code, and the grades served from your intent to use, the first 3 columns, will pull in from the November 1 report. You are then also going to add some data in. You're going to add what grades were actually served when you were able to hire staff. You're going to add what was the final ratio for the teacher to student ratio that was for the impacted grades. You're going to also add in what was your end of the year screener percentage for reading for those grades that were impacted. And you're going to write the total expense used for 31A that was benefited that school. For Part C, this was the section about retention and recruitment and using up to 30% of your allocation, of your 31A allocation for using strategies for retention and recruitment. If on your November 1 intent to use report, you said you were going to use the money in this fashion, you would check the box first at the top. Some districts, just as an information for everybody, some districts chose one section, one flexibility over another. Some used both. So you would only complete the parts that you did use the money for, just like in section 1 or 2 and 3, just the categories that you use it for. So if you did use your section 31A grant this year for retention and recruitment because you were an eligible district, you met the requirements, then you would check that box and you would complete the table to show what strategy types you used. There are 5 different strategies that are listed in this table. One is preparation. So again, did you use for teachers or staff advancement coursework or certifications? Retention of current instructional and support staff. Did you have some strategies related to that topic or that category? Did you provide supplemental professional learning that supported the intent and purpose of the law and was supplemental? Did you have additional mentoring and induction programs as a strategy? Or did you have recruitment of new instructional and support staff? So any one of those categories that you used the funds for, you would fill out the entire row if you hit yes, that I used funds in this way. And again, the 4 columns for each type of strategy includes the number of teachers it impacted, the number of support staff it impacted, the grades impacted, and the amount of Section 31A funds used. Again, you refer to your help guide if you have questions about this, and please reach out to your Section 31A single point of contact, as we will be happy to help. One more thing that I do want to note here, because we did have questions when this was first introduced in the fall, was Section 31A14, when am I going to start seeing payments for this intent to use form? And just to clarify, this was not an additional grant. This was just a new flexibility of how you could currently use your money if you were an eligible district. We have some great questions in the chat. We'll answer those at the end if there is any clarification needed. I know our team is answering the questions very nicely as we go along as well. So as we wrap up here with it, so you have now completed Section 2 through 5 with all of that additional information about how the costs were itemized, thinking about what kind of supports that benefited the students during the current grant period, the school year and the summer following the school year. So of course, the very first thing you have to do is you have to go back to Section 1 to get all the data to pull forward back into that Part B that Stephanie spoke about. So go back to Section 1, where you hit save, and make sure Section B now matches Section A on that screen, and you should get your check mark. Then you can move down on the navigation slide menu down to the status options, and you are ready to submit your report. As Joan talked about, you're going to have 2 options. If your application is in progress, you're going to have report submitted, report canceled. After you have all your check marks on all 5 screens, go ahead and click report submitted or report submit report. As we mentioned at the beginning, it is a law that the reports are due by July 15th, 2025. On our Section 31A website, we do have some more information, as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, about our Section 31A YouTube playlist that will have different recordings about the MTSS questions, different recordings about our legislative updates this year with some of the more information about the expanded use of funds. There's a webinar recorded specifically that we did in October about those expanded use of funds if you do have more questions about it. Again, this was year 1 of those new sections. We will continue to watch the legislation updates this summer as the new State School Aid Act gets updated. There's also on our Section 31A website already information about office hours that we're going to be available for to answer any district specific questions through the middle of June all the way until the report is due on July 15th. And as always, please feel free to reach out to us on our team. So you can see on this last slide that you do have a full Section 31A team now this month of May and going into June. And this is our regionalization of services and who your single point of contact, your SPOC is, like Stephanie referenced, your single point of contact. So please reach out to us with any district specific questions. We're going to stay on to answer any more questions that have come in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great day.